Hello, everyone, and welcome to the English Hour. And in this episode, we have a very special topic. A couple minutes ago, not a couple, I think 20 minutes ago, we were talking with John Berg about possible topics or issues that we could cover in today's lecture. And his suggestion was...
life on Mars or space travel.
Yeah, so at first I thought it was very technical because it can get very technical, right? There are a lot of details.
Exactly.
But then we thought, well, we can give technical bits and pieces, but we can also talk in more general terms and make it appealing to the general public. So we can talk about the developments in space travel, we can talk about the conditions necessary for life, and then John Berg can also give us some details that the average reader might not be familiar with. So I think we should get started by talking about the developments in space travel, because as far as I know, space travel was not very affordable and it wasn't easy for most governments, but now it seems that it is commonplace. So what are your thoughts on that?
Hello guys. Well, I think this is an exciting topic because in the life of our civilization as human beings, the humankind, if you will, we always, turned up and gazed at the skies and thought about how marvelous it would be to one day travel into space and explore different places. It's like planets, moons. And I think, within the last century, we have been able to achieve certain milestones that maybe previous generations would have never dreamed of. I think the first one that comes to mind is moon landing, right?
Right.
That was an incredible milestone. And it generated so much excitement and astonishment that you can say that some people found it even difficult to believe that it was real.
Yeah, it was hype.
Exactly.
And I think it also generated a lot of competition, because if you go back to the Cold War days,
exactly,
there was a lot of competition, fierce competition between the US and the USSR,
exactly,
which was Russia back then.
That's right, the space race, right? As part of the Cold War, it was one of the most important frontiers of the Cold War. And actually, you know what? Historically, the moon landing came as a result of a challenge that was put on by President Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. And this was because Russia, in this case, the Soviet Union, beat the United States to the race in human spaceflight. So the first country that managed, that was successfully completed a spaceflight, a human spaceflight, was the Soviet Union, Yuri Gagarin. He went up in space.
And I think the Americans considered that as a huge blow to their pride.
Exactly, that was a huge blow. I think the national morale was down. Everybody was panicking in the West, what's going to happen? Is communism going to take over the world?
Well, the universe.
The universe, exactly. In this case, it would be the universe. And after that, moon landing happens. And this is something that the Soviet Union simply cannot fight against. They're not able to replicate the same travel. So it stays there. And for 4 decades, I think they did this moon landing a dozen times more. I think 11 more times. And then after that, there was nothing, up until 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of back into the discussion again, sending people up in space.
Yeah, well, the thing here is that, in the past, space travel was the realm of governments or incredibly powerful corporations, such as maybe the Boeing Corporation, NASA, which is the space travel agency of the US, or the US government, or the Russian, Chinese, or I don't know, the Indian government. But right now we have a pretty boy in this game and a new company, which is SpaceX. So most people might not be familiar with the name, but for those of us who like to read news on space and who like to follow the latest developments, in the US, SpaceX is a game changer. And why is that?
Exactly. Well, SpaceX was founded and is being run by Elon Musk, a South African American entrepreneur and a scientist of his own right. He's also called a genius by some people.
Yeah.
I think there could be some truth to that. And this person is one of the leading figures in space travel.
I think we can say that he single-handedly reshaped the future of two industries. One is electric vehicles, the other one is space travel.
That's right. Well, he has more than one company, of course, SpaceX being one and Tesla being another. He first he first appeared on the radar as the founder of PayPal, actually. This hugely popular global payment platform, and then he kind of moved away from it. And in his words, he said he wanted to follow what is in trend, what is actually needed in the world. So he said the payment platform was great at the time, but then he realized everybody was doing the same thing or similar things, and he saw that electric cars were the future. So he jumped on that bandwagon and created Tesla, which is wildly successful.
Well, there's something I'd like to add here. So Elon Musk obtained millions of dollars after the sale of PayPal, and he used most of his fortune, well, you can say pretty much everything that he owned, and he distributed all that money into two very risky industries. One is space travel with SpaceX, and the other is electric vehicles with Tesla. And this might sound astonishing to a lot of people, because imagine this: you're in your mid-30s and you've got millions of dollars in the bank, and you risk everything for maybe the collective future of the world, or for some noble cause. And another interesting thing that Musk shares is that when he got the idea for SpaceX, he was ridiculed by what he considered his heroes. And I can't imagine how heartbreaking that must be.
That's right. Well, he's definitely somebody who pursues his passion and curiosity, because I think he received in excess of $150 million, something like 170, after the sale of PayPal. And then he was basically set for life. I mean, if all he was after was comfortable living, he could easily afford a luxurious lifestyle for himself and his children, his grandchildren. He would be fine. But he didn't settle with that. He didn't settle. He just went all out, and he actually spent all of the money coming from the PayPal sale, and he also got in debt. And he's something like $5-10 million debt.
He was about to go bankrupt.
Exactly.
2 or 3 times with Tesla and SpaceX.
That's right. It was very difficult. But
it was on the brink of bankruptcy before they secured further financing.
Exactly. And now he's this guy who has brought us electric cars that are faster and more powerful than
fashionable.
And fashionable than internal combustion engine counterparts. And he's also the same person who has brought us renewable rockets, reusable rockets.
I think he is the person who made electric vehicles glamorous or cool.
Really, yeah. I mean, when you see a Tesla on the street, you're like, wow. And you're staring all the time, until it disappears. Your eyes just keep following it. I mean, it's even the super exotic cars have not, I don't think, received or elicited so much excitement.
And attention.
Exactly. I mean, it's just a very small side note. Model X is an SUV vehicle, and it speeds to 100 kilometers in 3 seconds, something like that. That's
2.9 or something, maybe less.
I mean, that is super sport car territory. It's Lamborghini, Ferrari, those guys are doing that. So now the important point about Elon Musk is that his company, SpaceX, successfully completed a rocket launch. And this is a 3-stage rocket called Falcon Heavy, and it's going to deliver a payload to Mars. So it's going to travel to Mars. And Elon Musk thinks of this project as a preliminary project which will be followed by actual human travel to Mars. So that is very exciting news. And I think, that is our starting point.
Yeah, well, another thing about SpaceX is that it's the company that made space travel and space research or science affordable. Because before SpaceX, if you used a rocket once for sending cargo off to space, you could not reuse it because it would simply destroy itself. It would break into pieces and it would be useless. And the biggest cost was the cost of the rocket. The revolutionary thing SpaceX accomplished is the reusing of rockets. So SpaceX can launch rockets into space, and those rockets marvelously come back and land on the launch pad. And that's an incredible sight. And in the last Falcon Heavy launch, I saw two boosters, two sort of auxiliary rockets came down at the same time and land at the same time. It was an incredible sight.
Exactly. I mean, it is something that this industry has never experienced. I think this is exactly the reason, this type of imagination and vision is exactly the reason why Elon Musk and his company SpaceX has been able to penetrate a market that is incredibly powerfully guarded. Like you have, as you mentioned, Boeing, Airbus, Lockheed, like these guys have been around for decades. And they're these huge, gigantic corporations that have so much money to spend. They can do all kinds of research and development that they want. They have the support of the government. All of the government projects are going to them, and these projects are funding more of their research. So there is like this never-ending, this perpetual development and growth. And SpaceX basically just on the merit of their imaginativeness, this innovation, they were able to basically start taking NASA projects and NASA appointments and commission.
That is true.
That is special.
Well, there is a little side note I'd like to add here. And in addition to SpaceX, there is another player in the game, and it's the Blue Ocean by Jeff Bezos, who is the founder of Amazon.
Exactly.
So he also has a huge fortune, millions of dollars, and he
himself is a billionaire.
I think he became the richest person in the world.
Exactly.
So he shares that spot with Bill Gates, I think. Sometimes he's number one, sometimes Bill Gates is number one.
That's right.
And he is also very interested in space travel, but I think he has a different vision or a different approach. And the company he established, Blue Ocean, is also a player in space travel.
That's right. Well, space travel, now that we've talked about the industry landscape a little bit and what is going on in terms of our efforts to go up there, we can also talk a little bit about what is possible to achieve or accomplish. And if we go back to Elon Musk's vision, according to his speeches so far, the announcements and statements that he's been making, he thinks that travel to Mars and human travel to Mars is not only possible, it is just the beginning. He actually is planning to colonize Mars. Yep. He thinks that Mars could be another planet on which human life will thrive. And this is a huge vision that I don't think we have anybody else saying something like that out there.
Well, it's difficult because it's extremely difficult. For example, in order for life to flourish, to thrive in a planet, you need air, oxygen, water, certain conditions that are essential for human survival. And right now, Mars isn't exactly like the Earth. So Musk plans to sort of bomb certain parts of Mars to start chemical reactions so that it could be more like the Earth. But it's a grand vision. It's an extremely difficult thing to accomplish, but of course it's not impossible.
That's right. Well, I think it's time we can give you guys a few basic metrics of data and scientific bits of information about what is possible and what is within the realms of achievability. And if as you just mentioned, Elon Musk is on record saying that he wants to drop thermonuclear bombs at the poles of Mars, and those bombs are going to be used to heat up the planet, basically, because the average temperature in Mars is much lower than what we have here on Earth.
But right now, I've got a question.
Sure.
So you said this, great, start a reaction, thermonuclear reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Great. But then I can't stop imagining that something will go wrong. So the universe is a gigantic system, and maybe the temperature of the Mars is meant to be that way, and maybe if the temperature increases, it can lead to changes in the universe. It can debalance or destabilize the region, the planetary system, and it can cause everything to collapse.
Well, I mean, that could be a concern. I think there could be a few arguments in favor of that and also against that. One thing that could be in favor is there is this thing called butterfly effect, and since the universe is this huge organic whole and everything is basically connected, you can say that one change, no matter how small, could have a huge impact in another region of the same system, which in this case is the universe. An argument against that could be just the sheer size and scale of everything that is involved. It's like the universe, even the observable universe, is just so large, so immense that our solar system is, when you call it tiny, it is just doing injustice to how tiny it actually is. I mean, the planet is extremely tiny. The solar system, even the galaxy, our galaxy is just, incomparably tiny in comparison to the universe. So even though it will make an impact for sure, what that impact will be and, whether it would matter in the grand scheme of things is going to be something that scientists will have to, work on and calculate.
Well, I've got an objection, so I'm just thinking on the spot. So let's think this way. You can, of course, argue that, well, the solar system is just a tiny bit in the grand scheme of the universe, but it's that tiny thing that matters to us. Maybe the collapse of the solar system will not matter to the existence of the universe, but it certainly will matter to the existence of the humankind as a species.
Sure. Yeah. Well, here's how I think about it. I think somebody like Elon Musk surely would be thinking about dropping these bombs and having to go and live in this planet, which has been basically bombed, which has been the recipient of a nuclear attack, basically. So I think he definitely thinks about the aftermath of this project. So if he thought that it would have catastrophic effects for the planet itself, for Mars, or for the surrounding environment, I think that would simply be out of question for him.
So right now I've got a different approach. So now that I have questions about life in space, in other planets, or on Mars, I am thinking like this. Well, maybe life in another planet or on another planet will not be an option, but space travel will certainly be an option. For example, maybe 10 years from now, I'll be hopping on a spaceship and I'll be going for, breakfast to Mars, or I'll be going for a night out to the moon, and I'll be watching the Earth from outside the Earth, from the space. And that could be really fun, and that could give an incredible experience to everyone.
Sure.
So maybe life on another planet will not be an option, but still I feel thrilled that I could travel in space as an average person.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree. It would be just amazing, to be up there, it's just to be out there, to be away from your own planet, which you associate with everything that is human, your relationships, your life, your country, the tools and technology that you use, everything is here on this planet. So it would be amazing to be discovering something else out there. However, I think the question of whether life is possible on another planet, life is possible, meaning human life is possible, not extraterrestrial life, which is a totally different subject. I think that question basically hinges on whether or not we will be able to harness the type of sustainable energy resources that will enable something like that. What I'm trying to say is, if a planet is uninhabitable, you can go there and you can still have the technology to create this ecosystem in which you can breathe, you can function as a human being, as a social being, you can do all of the things that you're doing basically here on Earth. But what you need is energy.
A different system,
and to empower that system, you need energy. So we're talking, for example, different types of energy that can be created by a totally different method, a totally different strategy. Like you talk about harnessing the energy of something like a nuclear reaction. For example, like there's fission, there's fission, there's fusion. These things we are not able yet to store the energy of something as big as or as catastrophic as a nuclear bomb, for example. But if you're able to store that energy, then you can use that, like, even to basically allow life on a different planet to exist. But all of these things are speculations, of course. So,
Well, right now we're in the year 2018. So this is the year we're recording this episode. And I'm really curious, and I'd like to see what will happen in the next decade.
Yeah, I'm gonna maybe if we're gonna end this, I would like to add one thing about Musk. His goals currently, his stated goals are extremely aggressive. He's not just saying that life on Mars, human life on Mars is possible. He's not just saying we're gonna get there. He's basically giving us a timeline. He's saying, I'm going to achieve this within the late 2020s. Basically, he's saying, like, after 2026, we're going to have the first colony.
That's great.
A human colony traveling to Mars. And that is like big words coming from somebody who has already proved that he's capable of achieving many things.
Yeah.
So I think, it would be safe to take heed and see what he comes up with. But, it's exciting.
Yeah, well, those are credible claims based on the extraordinary accomplishments he has had. But no matter what happens, I think I've got a great respect for this man, and I think no matter the outcome, he will have contributed greatly to space travel.
I agree. Exactly.
So I think we can wrap up this episode, and it's been an interesting talk on space travel. And Canberk, I think in 10 years we can come back to this episode and see what has changed.
Yeah, well, I have a sneaking suspicion that we're going to come back to it a little earlier than that. But let's see what happens.
Yeah, well, till the next episode, take care, guys.
Bye-bye.